Michael gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else.
I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. Welcome to the programme, everybody. Welcome to another trading week here on European equity markets. My colleague Matt Miller is away for this week, so I'll hold the fort here in London. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes. We also check the latest in the breaking news across the Bloomberg as well. And we're waiting for some key data out of the German economy. So we'll get there right now. The IFO number, so that measure of investor confidence for November. German business confidence, the index at 95. The estimate was for 95 as well. So that was exactly in line with expectations. Talking of expectations, the German expectations index comes in at 92.1. That is a touch below the estimate of 92.5. So none of that seems to be all that far away from the expected numbers, and so unlikely to be doing too much to the euro. Although we do see a little bit of a retreat. We had seen some strength in the euro, and now we see it flat against the dollar. So 110.21 is where we trade for the euro dollar as we digest perhaps that slightly weaker than expected number on expectations portion of the IFO weighing on the single currency at this point. Let's check the markets for you though elsewhere, and stocks around Europe actually fairly buoyant today. Stock 600 up by 0.9%, the FTSE 100 up 0.7%, the CAC 40 up 0.7%, and the Xetra DAX up 0.6%. So we're looking for a bounce in any of those trade sensitive sectors because we've seen President Trump saying that we're very close to a deal. That was Friday's story, and that lifted US stock markets on Friday. So we're playing a little bit of catch up through the Asian session certainly, and into Europe. And then we've heard over the weekend from the Chinese, they're talking about IP theft, and they're going to be taking that increasingly seriously and upping the punishments against companies that steal intellectual property. So all of that is positive for risk sentiment and risk appetite, and as a result we see stocks going higher. The other side of that trade, of course, is that we see some money coming out of government debt, and we see yields going higher. So 1.78 is where we trade on the US 10-year yield. This is lifting oil prices, well, not all that much. We're up 0.3% on Brent right now, 63.61. Similar percentage move higher on WTI at 57.92. The dollar is flat to negative. We had seen, as I say, some euro strength. That seems to that's been pared back, and we're flat there now. The pound is a little stronger, up 0.4% now. 128.81 for cable. That on the back of a better poll showing for the ruling Conservative Party, of course. So that's a quick look at the data. Let's get to our top story around trade. China has said it will raise penalties on violations of intellectual property rights. IP theft is one of the sticking points of the negotiations between Washington and Beijing. So far, the market reaction has been muted, suggesting investors need more convincing on a phase one trade deal, although 0.8% higher. Perhaps we're gathering momentum, and that does look to be a slightly more convincing move to the upside. For more, I'm joined by Hugh Gimber, Global Market Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management. Good morning to you once again, Hugh. I guess in terms of muted reactions, US futures point higher by just 0.3%. How excited should we be about the Chinese talking more tough on intellectual property theft?
Good morning. So I think this is good news because intellectual property has been one of the tougher areas, I think, to see a resolution on over the past few weeks. So the fact that the administration in Beijing are opening up to tougher sanctions on this is certainly trending in a positive direction. I think the market reaction, though, is probably that people felt like a phase one deal was growing quite near anyway. And so this is moving us marginally closer to that kind of outcome. But I don't think it changes the picture materially.
What about what this is doing to the global economy? We've looked at some PMI data for the manufacturing sector. We've talked a lot about manufacturing recessions in recent months. Do we see some bottoming out there? And that'll bring us on nicely to the German story, of course. But what do we see from a global perspective around manufacturing at the moment?
Of course. So I think we have seen a bottoming over the past couple of months. It was confirmed in the flash data that we had out on Friday. The US looking like they might be slightly further ahead on that story than the Eurozone. When I think back to the trade issue around US and China, for me to see a big push higher from here, you want to give businesses some kind of certainty that this sort of better tone and edging towards a truce is potentially here to stay. Because I think then you can start to see business confidence rising and business investment coming back. But if this is just a sort of temporary pause and people fear that this could come back into the headlines very quickly, then I don't think you'll see that bounce in business investment. And therefore I think the bounce in manufacturing could be contained.
And does it depend on whether we see further deterioration in the relationship between the US and China from here? Because we could still have further tariffs imposed in December, couldn't we? So, you know, we've got a lot of tariffs in place at the moment, but a further deterioration from where we are at this point would be that sort of next downward leg for manufacturing, perhaps, do you think?
I completely agree. So obviously trying to assess what the market's priced is difficult on these topics, but anecdotally I think it's broadly assumed now that the mid-December tariffs are off the table. And so even though in the sort of legislature those are still very much front and centre, I think that would be seen as incrementally bad news given where we are today.
I went through some of the latest numbers on German investor confidence, the IFO business confidence coming in at 95, and that's exactly in line with a number like with the number 95 that had been expected. We saw a little bit of a pullback in the euro, but actually not much. We're pretty flat on the euro, actually. One of my colleagues on the Markets Live blog writing that it's interesting when we see data not deteriorate in Europe or not get worse in Germany, because then it reduces the chance of fiscal stimulus. And so that is the thinking that the market is going through when trying to price off these headlines.
Completely. And when you think back to Germany just sneaking past a recession for the third quarter GDP print, I think it's perfectly fair for those that in the market were saying that actually that's sort of bad news, bizarrely, because the German finance ministry have told us for some time that if they do see a significant deterioration in the data, then they feel like they will need to spend more. But if you're avoiding recession by 0.1% and then feeling that that hasn't hit the bar for the taps to be turned on in 2020, then there's sort of quite a big question out there as to how bad things would need to get.
Do we get no significant ramp up in fiscal stimulus in the Eurozone unless we see unemployment on the rise? Because for many people that is when a downturn in an economy starts to feel real.
I think that's very fair, yes. And to be honest, the strength of the labour market has been one of the surprises that we've had for this year, in my view, both in the US and in the Eurozone. So when you think about what's holding this expansion together, it really has been the strength of the consumer and consumer spending, and therefore the labour market playing into that very closely.
And where does all this conversation then, Hugh, as fascinating as it is, leave our investment strategy right now? Because I know that you've been fairly convinced about US equities and quality US stocks of late. How much will that stand up to the test of better news on trade, for example?
Sure. So I think that is the risk to my relatively positive view on the US, because when I'm thinking about equities, I'm thinking about playing them in a reasonably defensive way at the moment. And so looking to that higher quality nature of the US market as a more defensive way to allocate to global stocks. Next year, if we do see a further bounce in the PMIs and the trade news lifts, and touch wood, we may even get some kind of Brexit resolution, then that is a scenario where I would expect European equities to do a bit better. But on the balance of risks, I still think that a more defensive allocation at the moment makes sense.
Yeah, what was it Boris Johnson said? An end to the box set Brexit drama or something. That's what he wants with his oven-ready Brexit deal, as he's said so many times. Hugh, what about M&A in Europe? Because you might think that at a time when there is so much uncertainty about global growth and a trade tense discussion continues between the US and China, you might have thought that corporates would sit on their hands on M&A, but November does seem to have been quite busy, and certainly the end of it with Novartis today and LVMH today. These are big businesses making pretty sizable deals.
No, that's fair. I mean, I would tie this personally back into the earnings outlook, because I think companies at this stage are struggling to see how they can grow earnings organically and are starting to look for M&A as the easier option, really, and particularly looking out into earnings expectations for 2020. I think if we were to see an environment of sort of low single-digit earnings growth both in Europe and the US, then that would be really a pretty good scenario. So companies looking for alternative ways in which to try and boost their top line numbers, I think is typical of this sort of late cycle environment.
Hugh, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us today. Hugh Gimber, Global Market Strategist at JP Morgan Asset Management, covering trade and the latest on that story and the implications for investment strategy. Let's get to the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Anna. Let's start in Europe. Italy may be willing to compromise on a German plan for further integration of the European Union's banking system. That includes setting limits on holdings of sovereign debt. Bloomberg's John Verlaine has all the details.
Vincenzo Amendola, Minister for European Affairs, said in an interview he is confident that a good compromise can be found next month. Italy has expressed concern on a German plan to consider more cooperation on guaranteeing deposits in exchange for demands such as stricter rules on banks' sovereign debt holdings. In Rome, John Verlaine, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Right, now let's cross over to Hong Kong, where it's been a big win for pro-democracy candidates in local district council elections, and that was on Sunday. They won 86% of more than 440 seats, and Bloomberg's East Asia government reporter, that's Ian Marlowe, joins us now live from Hong Kong. Ian, thanks so much for joining us. How has the government and Beijing responded to this?
Yeah, they have come out to reiterate firmly that they support the Hong Kong government of Chief Executive Carrie Lam and have warned foreign countries once again from meddling in these in Hong Kong affairs and the rest of it. It's a pretty strong pushback, and there's an attempt here to play down the fact that this is looking bad for the government. But the Hong Kong local government has come out and said that they will kind of reflect humbly on the results, but it's not clear exactly what that means at the moment.
And Ian, these district councillors have very little power, really, politically. So what leverage do they have in bigger issues like electing the next chief executive in Hong Kong?
Yeah, district councillors really handle the lowest level of government services in Hong Kong. So, community events, advising the government on local issues in their ridings and that sort of thing. But they also have a role to play in appointing 117 of the 1,200 member council that selects the chief executive of Hong Kong, the top leader here. And that those candidates are vetted by Beijing, but they still need a majority, 600 people in that 1,200 member council to push through their candidates. So removing 117 of those and giving them over to the opposition, the pro-democracy lawmakers, gives them a chance to try and influence the outcome of that election, even though Hong Kong doesn't have full universal suffrage and one vote for one person. So it's a bit of a strange situation here with a lot of focus on these elections, which people in Hong Kong generally haven't paid that much attention to, but the turnout is record-breaking, and it's coming after nearly 6 months of protest, so there's been a lot of enthusiasm about this election.
Bloomberg's East Asia government reporter there, Ian Marlowe, thank you so much, and we'll bring you more on Hong Kong throughout the morning. Meanwhile, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg is running for president in 2020. He's joining a crowded race of Democrats. He brings with him a mix of moderate policies and experience in business and City Hall. The 77-year-old says President Trump is an existential threat to the U.S. and its values. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much. much for that, Leanne. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, LVMH puts a ring on it, buying Tiffany for more than $16 billion. We discuss the luxury tie-up with Bloomberg Opinion's Andrea Felsted. That's coming up next. You can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on the Bloomberg Business app. Plenty there on the global trade story, and that seems to be what's lifting European equity markets up 0.7% right now. That and the M&A story from luxury to medicines. We'll talk about that next. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
CIOs, did you know digital transformation starts with 3 simple letters? It's not API or IoT. It's GEP, innovative cloud-based procurement and supply chain software. GEP has hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 customers and smart, intuitive software products that business users love. 3 letters, GEP, leaders in unified procurement and supply chain solutions. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzzed is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
Splunk is the world's first data-to-everything platform. Its software collects machine data and provides insight into businesses worldwide. Joining us for an exclusive interview, it is Splunk President and CEO, Doug Merritt. I wanted to talk about this new pricing model, the volume-based and then booking the revenue annually instead of on a multi-year basis. Both of those analysts love today. Why the change?
One of the biggest issues we've had with Splunk is you get so much value out of the platform, and it's a data volume-based product that people get scared on how much volume is going to go through. And we've heard for years that the lack of predictability is something they'd want to have a better option around. And so we came out with 2 pricing metrics a month and change ago that were one's an enhancement, one is new. The enhancement for data volume contracts is we've tiered the pricing and really condensed the tiers into much broader bands with an unlimited option at the upper end of that pricing curve. The alternative, which is probably more fundamentally appropriate long term, is just the amount of infrastructure that you need to operate the product. We rolled both out because the way that you use the product could make one more advantageous for a customer versus the other.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities jumped at the open. They're up 0.7% right now. LVMH in particular bounding higher, 2.1% as it closes this $16.7 billion deal to buy Tiffany. In terms of the the rest of the markets, it is broadly a positive trading session. The Xetra DAX gains 0.5%, the CAC 40 similarly. This after Asian equities also climbed. MSCI Asia Pacific up 0.6%. And we had a big surge in Hong Kong. The MSCI Hong Kong index up by 1.9% after the weekend district council elections on Sunday gave a landslide for pro-democracy candidates. Perhaps some relief that those elections, district council elections, went off smoothly without violence. In terms of US futures, looking ahead to the market open there in what is Thanksgiving week, of course, Dow Jones futures up 0.2%, S&P 500 futures equally. In terms of the bond market, the German IFO data out this morning, key for Europe. Bunds fell amid hopes of a trade deal this morning. Where are we now? Negative 34 basis points, so up by 8 basis points on German Bund yields and 1.78% for US benchmark yield, so up by 1.5 basis points there. And just elsewhere in the markets, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index slightly softer, the pound stronger 0.4% against the dollar, the Japanese yen weaker 0.2%, trading at 108.85. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Good morning, Caroline. Turkey is beginning to test a radar detection system. This is part of the anti-missile batteries it bought from Russia. Turkey has been sparring with its NATO allies over the system known as the S-400. The purchase of the device risks sanctions from the US, but President Erdogan remains confident his personal rapport with Trump can ward off any more punitive actions. A 23-year-old man will appear in court later, charged following the discovery of 39 bodies in a lorry container in Essex. Christopher Kennedy from County Armagh is accused of human trafficking offences. 2 other men remain in custody on manslaughter charges. One of them, 25-year-old Maurice Robinson from County Armagh. He's due at the Old Bailey later today. And more than 60 doctors have written to the Home Secretary saying WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange urgently needs medical treatment. They've told Priti Patel that if he doesn't get it, he could die in prison. In a letter published by WikiLeaks, the medics say an independent checkup is needed to see if he's fit enough for legal proceedings. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the City of London. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Andrea Felstead, who's been writing about this LVMH blockbuster deal for the luxury jewellery maker Tiffany. Very good morning to you, Andrea. So clearly in the luxury space, you know, if it's cheap, it's not worth having. So let's talk about whether LVMH is getting good value for this. They've had to increase their offer a couple of times, haven't they? But you still say that compared to the target's cost of capital, this looks good. What's the analysis we're doing?
To meet the cost of capital, they probably need to increase sales by about 7% a year, and their forecast for Tiffany about 4% in 2021, 2022. So they've got the work cut out. They've got to lift the margins from about 18% to between 23, 24, 25%, which again, it's doable, but it's not going to be easy. I mean, LVMH has got scale, it's got lots of resources. It really should be able to do this, but it's not getting a bargain.
And that is what Tiffany is going to find when it goes into a bigger stable, that is part of a big business with a lot more heft and a lot more ability to do the marketing that it needs.
Yes, exactly. Just to give more energy to its strategy. Tiffany's been doing all the right things. There's no doubt about that. It's been trying to reinvigorate its jewellery offer, appeal to younger people, all the right things, but it just hasn't really borne fruit yet. And you've got the LVMH stable, lots more energy, lots of money, really being able to push into Asia, have lots of clout with the landlords. They'll be able to get good stores in Asia, turbocharge online. So it really should be feasible.
Because I thought this was going to be all about the US consumer, but actually it isn't about just targeting the US consumer that likes the blue boxes. It's about the global consumer in Asia.
That's right. It's about broadening it into Asia and broadening also into Europe. Well, Tiffany still doesn't have that many stores, so it's really making this a global play, and it will be a millennial Chinese play on luxury, that's where all the growth is.
Right, so that's where the growth is, where the money for this kind of luxury item, jewellery of this this sort of price bracket can be found. What about the rivalry between LVMH and Richemont then? Because Bernard Arnault of LVMH, he doesn't like to do things by halves, and he's trying to get back up the rankings. Where does this leave them?
Well, I think this is very worrying for Richemont. Everybody thinks about Tiffany as the sterling silver necklaces, returns Tiffany, but actually some of their ranges are really quite nice, and they are quite sort of more upmarket fine jewellery, the Tiffany T, for example. And that's not a million miles away from some of Cartier's best-selling lines, those love bangles that all the celebrities wear. The Cartier is still more expensive than the Tiffany ranges, but LVMH would have more scope to increase, to elevate those products, increase those price points, and I think that's a real worry for Cartier.
So that's something for Cartier and Richemont to consider. Finally then, Andrea, I mean, there hasn't been a counter bidder, not that we've seen yet. I mean, could one unlikely to emerge at this late stage?
I think it's pretty unlikely. They, sweetening that bid, although they had to pay a bit more, they've got that recommendation, makes it much harder for anybody to come in.
Okay, Andrea, thanks very much. Bloomberg opinion columnist Andrea Felsted with the latest on that M&A story, LVMH buying the luxury jewellery maker Tiffany, and that is a story that's playing high across the Bloomberg terminal this morning. Certainly one of the most popular stories, and certainly something that's been lifting the sector in the early part of the trading day. So the share price of LVMH itself, remember that's the acquirer, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see that going higher, but it is this morning up by 2.1%. We will wait to see how the US jewellery sector responds to this. We have seen some upward moves within the jewellery space more broadly in Europe this morning. M&A very much part of that story. Elsewhere, we're optimistic around trade once again. President Trump's talking about a deal being very near. The Chinese talking about being more serious about intellectual property theft. All of that adding up to a risk-on mood for equity markets. We're higher across the European markets. We'll get you an update on where we are across the globe next. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Now that many U.S. states have legalized sports betting following a 2018 Supreme Court ruling, it's natural to wonder if Wall Street will start looking for a piece of the action. A few firms already are. At least one is actually making bets, much as a hedge fund trades stock. Susquehanna International Group, a trading firm headquartered in Pennsylvania, is building up a sports betting division in Ireland. The business unit, called Nelly Analytics, named after co-founder Jeff Yaz's dog, has about 20 employees. Susquehanna is active on the Betfair and Matchbook online sports betting exchanges. South Africa's only black billionaire, Patrice Motsepe, has taken a key stake in the country's best-performing rugby team, adding to his sporting interest as he already owns the national soccer champions. Motsepe acquired 37% stake in the Blue Bulls Rugby Union. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr. The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Full breakfast, cup of coffee, whatever you have in the morning, have it at daybreak.
What's the outlook for the pound if there is another election?
Nathan Hager.
The U.S. could still delay those tariffs?
And Karen Moscow.
It is the fifth major industry player to make some sort of zero commission offer.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Bloomberg has more from Hong Kong.
Weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Business is like a puzzle.
Can you make a call given this swirl of data?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning, everybody. 9:30 here in London, 10:30 if you're in Paris or Berlin. I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes, so let's do that here on Bloomberg Radio. We've got European equity markets up by 0.7% right now, so European equity markets doing quite nicely in terms of the sectors that are moving us around this morning. We've got all of the sectors, in fact, across Europe in positive territory. So this move to the upside, pretty broad-based. Some of those sectors that are very responsive to the latest trade headlines, they're moving higher. So basic resources, the mining sector up by 1.8%, travel and leisure up by 1.1%, autos and auto parts up by 0.9%. So they're the biggest gainers. Some of the more, some of the less volatile and more bond-like, if you like, the bond proxy sectors to the downside. So telecoms and real estate, we find those kind of sectors at the bottom of the rankings in terms of today's stock market performance. So in terms of the geography, the FTSE 100 up by 0.7% in London. The CAC 40 in Paris up 0.5%. The Xetra DAX up 0.4%. So it's those moves higher in basic resource stocks that's really helping that outperformance on London markets today. US futures looking ahead a little bit, up by 2 to 3% in terms of where we expect to see US equity markets opening up. The Asian session has been positive, up by 0.6%. And we're factoring in here comments from President Trump on Friday. He suggested a trade deal could be very close. Also, the latest lines coming through from China around intellectual property and the extent to which they are punishing companies that infringe the rules or break the rules on IP. That is all seen as very risk positive. With that, we see moves higher in oil prices, just up by 0.2% or so. And the US 10-year yield up by up at 1.78% right now as we see money coming out of bond markets. The dollar itself is fairly flat. We see a little bit of selling of the yen, as you might expect. It goes in hand with all of the risk-on moves that we're seeing today. The euro is a touch weaker after The IFO numbers came in on German investor confidence. They came in pretty much as had been anticipated. We do see a little bit of movement to the upside in the pound, though. 128.78 is where we trade on sterling. So that's a quick look at where we are on these markets this morning. Let's get to one of our top stories, and that is around the German data. Europe's biggest economy, then. Bloomberg Economics says today's IFO survey adds to evidence that Germany's economic slowdown has reached a bottom. Business surveys remain consistent with very subdued GDP growth, though, in the fourth quarter. For more, I'm joined by the IFO president, Clemens Fist. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the program then, Clemens. Let me ask you your initial response, your initial take on the numbers that look to be broadly as anticipated on the IFO survey.
Good morning, Anna. Yes, I would agree. It's a positive sign. We've seen a stabilization in our data and other data for some months now, and that's good news. In principle, it's coming mostly from good retail sales, a strong service sector, construction continues strong. The big problem is the manufacturing sector, and that continues. In fact, the index fell back here in November. The manufacturing sector is still stuck in recession, really, and that is a reason for concern because this sector is so important for the German economy.
Yes, and so we see this contrast between what we're seeing domestically in Germany and the export-driven elements of the German economy, the latter being more sluggish. What is it that's holding up the consumer then in Germany? Because they must see the headlines around the threats to the German business model, if you like, the threats to the export engine.
Correct. Now, we've had some fiscal stimulus this year that helps disposable incomes, 0.5% of GDP. We have more of that next year, about the same magnitude. We've got still rising employment numbers and quickly rising wages. So all of that is holding up the consumers. Interest rates, in addition, are very low. That's mostly driving the construction sector. So that is what's really supporting the economy. It's true that people are getting worried about their jobs in the manufacturing sector, but of course the service sector is the larger part of the economy, and there are some areas are very strong. For instance, if we look at IT services or other service providers, so it's really a divided economy.
Talk to me about the role of low interest rates in Germany at the moment, because yes, the theory would suggest low interest rates do support an economy, but in Germany, where the economy is maybe a little, people don't own homes to the extent that they do in some other Western countries, and we do see a lot more of a saving culture. That low interest rate environment could have a different impact on the German economy. So what's the latest thinking there?
It certainly does. So there is a lot of critique about the low interest rates coming from savers, from savings and loans banks. It's true, house ownership is low in Germany, and that means households benefit less from the rising real estate prices. So the impact, also Germans don't buy much less using consumer credit. So low interest rates stimulate less, and for many are a reason for concern. People see their old age saving coming out lower than they hoped. So it's not that low interest rates are stimulating the economy very strongly, but they're certainly stimulating the construction sector. Of course, we have countervailing effects in the construction sector. Tightening rent regulation does hold back investment, but still the construction sector is going quite well.
Okay, Clemens, thank you so much for joining us. The IFO president, Clemens Fist, joining us with the latest look at the German economy. Let's get the latest in global news now. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Anna. Hong Kong residents handed over an overwhelming victory to pro-democracy candidates in a vote for local district elections on Sunday. This was a stunning rejection of the financial hub's Beijing-backed government after months of protests seeking meaningful elections. Bloomberg's Karen Lee reports.
The vote saw record turnout of 71%, with more than 2.94 million people casting ballots. It comes as divisions harden in the city as the protests become more disruptive and the government refuses to compromise. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Japan and South Korea continue bickering after they reached a last-minute deal to rescue an expiring intelligence sharing pact. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds says this raises questions about ties between the two allies.
Japan rejected a South Korean complaint about the wording of an announcement that the two sides would hold talks on a dispute over export controls. Seoul accused Tokyo of intentionally leaking and distorting information about the agreement. The two countries said Saturday they would work toward a summit meeting in China next month. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Here in the UK, the Conservative Party has unveiled its manifesto. It includes promises to hire 50,000 extra nurses and a package of tax cuts for working people. It also commits to delivering Brexit and end years of deadlock. This as the Prime Minister is looking to consolidate his lead in the final 2 weeks of the campaign. And finally, as trade talks continue between the US and China, there is some news coming out of Beijing's so-called panda diplomacy. Berlin Zoo has put out a video of twin giant panda cubs, and they were born in late August. They're the children of Meng Meng. She was given by China to Germany back in 2017. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
The power of panda diplomacy. Thank you very much. Thanks, Leanne Gerrans with World News. Let's get your morning sports news. Here's George Alderman.
Sheffield United manager Chris Wilder says they wouldn't always celebrate a draw, but feels his side deserved to after a thriller with Manchester United. The home team went from 2-0 up to 3-2 down at Bramall Lane before Ollie McBurney's late equaliser meant the Premier League game finished 3-3. Wilder's impressed with how they're handling their first season back in the top flight.
You know, I've got players that are competing against world-class players, and my boys have gone toe-to-toe with them.
Rafa Nadal helped Spain win the Davis Cup for the first time since 2011 last night. The world tennis number one sealed a 2-0 victory over Canada in the final in Madrid. Great Britain were knocked out by Spain in the semis on Saturday. South African World Cup winner Faf de Klerk and England's Tom Curry returned to help Sale register their first win of the season in Rugby Union's European Champions Cup. They beat La Rochelle 25-15 to go second in Pool 2, but fellow Premiership side Gloucester are still looking for their opening group stage victory after losing 30-27 at Montpellier.
Thanks very much for that, George. Now with the roundup of the latest US sports, here's Pete Fox.
Action from Week 12 in the NFL from the early window. The Bears and Giants played at Taiwan. New York picked off Mitchell Trubisky 2 different times, but also missed a couple of field goals and falls short to the Bears in Chicago, 19-14. The Jets, a nice day, rolling the Raiders 34-3. Sam Darnold 315 and 2 touchdowns. New York has won 3 in a row. Redskins win their second, edging the Lions in D.C. 19-16. The defense was on display in Foxborough as the Patriots and Cowboys played at Taiwan, New England, winning their 10th, 13-9. The final. Julian Edelman, 8 receptions for 93 yards. And on Sunday Night Football, it was all San Francisco. They pounded the Packers 37-8. Garoppolo 253 and 2 touchdowns. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC Sports Update.
Pete, thanks very much for that. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Jeffrey Yu, head of the UK investment office at UBS, joins us next. Great person to speak to about China's commitment to clamp down on IP theft and to enforce penalties and regulations against companies that steal intellectual property. So let's talk to Jeffrey about that, get his take on what that does to the risk-on, risk-off mood in markets. It certainly seems to be supporting markets here in Europe today. European equity markets up by 0.7%. US futures also pointing higher by between 2 and 0.3%. Jerome Powell speaks later. Lots of US data later on this week. We'll ask him to look ahead to some of that with us as well. This is Bloomberg.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Have you wanted to... 'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Batteries running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
I love Black Friday. Busy shops, crazy people, average deals. It's so much fun.
Said no one ever. So be savvy and do Black Friday the easy way with Smarty. Grab a huge 100 gig data SIM for just £17 a month on the Mega Plan. And with no credit checks, speed restrictions or contracts tying you down, you can kick back with the best Black Friday deal around. Now that's Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile to find out more, but hurry, as this deal won't be around for long. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
At Lidl, we're big on those little reasons to be jolly. Like our delicious Favorina all-butter mini Stollen bites for just $1.99. And 6 deluxe mince pies for just $1.35. Big on a Christmas you can believe in. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes an eye.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Tottenham and Edmonton from 10 p.m. on Friday the 22nd of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 25th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
It's hard to enjoy your daily yoga routine when your mind is on your next VAT return and how to avoid the usual mistakes. But with QuickBooks, the new VAT Smart Scan technology does the work for you. As the deadline approaches, it checks for duplicates, looks for anomalies, and reviews VAT codes. So your biggest struggle is touching your forehead with your ankle. Search for QuickBooks, perfect for making tax digital. QuickBooks, backing you.
Going, gone.
Some things just don't hang around, like a great deal in Tesco Mobile's best ever Black Friday event. Right now you can get the Samsung Galaxy S10 for just $29.99 a month. But this deal ends Sunday 1st of December. Catch it before it's gone. Tesco Mobile's best ever Black Friday event. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Best ever Black Friday based on range of products in promotion was £35.99, now £29.99. Offer ends 1st of December. 36-month credit agreement, rolling monthly usage agreement, subject to status, phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Looking for a great phone to take brilliant photos, like an incredible iPhone 7 with a 12-megapixel camera? Then look no further than Tesco Mobile's best ever Black Friday event. You'll find an iPhone 7 for just $14.49 a month, our lowest ever price. Be quick, this deal ends Sunday 1st of December. Tesco Mobile, every little helps.
Best ever Black Friday based on range of products in promotion was £19.75, now £14.49. Offer ends 1st of December. 36-month credit agreement, rolling monthly usage agreement, subject to status, phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities this morning jumped 0.7%. LVMH up more than 2% after announcing that it will buy Tiffany for more than $16 billion in the largest luxury goods deal ever. Also, Novartis up just a fraction after it agreed to buy the medicines company for an equity value of about $6.8 billion. As for the other big news lines in the markets, China saying that it will raise penalties on violations of intellectual property rights in basically an attempt to address one of the big sticking points in the trade talks with the US. So that has helped to give the positive tone to the markets. We're also watching Turkey and the Turkish lira in particular as Turkey tests a component of its newly acquired Russian air defense system that does risk escalating this dispute with the United States, even potentially signaling sanctions basically from the US to Turkey. The Turkish lira currently trading at 5.74, so weaker 0.5% on the spot price, and against the euro also down 0.4% at 6.32. As for US futures, looking to the market open there, we're up 0.2% for S&P 500 futures, and in the bond markets this morning, not much reaction to the more positive signals in terms of the US-China trade deal. 1.78% for US benchmark yields, so up 1.5 basis points. German Bund yields at negative 35 basis points. They're also just ticking slightly higher this morning. And elsewhere in the markets, just give you a price check on oil, which has been stronger this morning, although we're paring back on some of the gains that we saw earlier this morning, up 0.1% with WTI crude at $57.86 the barrel. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Thank you. Let's start in Turkey, which is beginning to test a radar detection system. This is part of the anti-missile batteries it bought from Russia. Turkey has been sparring with its NATO allies over this system, known as an S-400. The purchase of the device risks sanctions from the US, but President Erdogan remains confident his personal rapport with President Trump can ward off more punitive actions. A 23-year-old man will appear in court later, charged following the discovery of 39 bodies in a lorry container in Essex. Christopher Kennedy from County Armagh is accused of human trafficking offences. 2 other men remain in custody on manslaughter charges. One of them, 25-year-old Maurice Robinson from County Armagh. He is due at the Old Bailey later today. And maybe Elon Musk will have the last laugh. He says Tesla has received 200,000 orders. That's for its Cybertruck. That's despite having 2 windows unexpectedly shatter in Thursday's big debut. Still, there's no risk for would-be buyers of the truck. Their $100 deposit is indeed fully refundable. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Leanne, thank you very much. Coming up next, our colleagues in the US are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's check in with Nathan Hager, who is no doubt watching European equity markets fly higher on expectations of trade deals. Good morning to you, Nathan.
Certainly, not just European equities, but futures on Wall Street as well this morning, Anna. We are getting ready for a holiday-shortened trading week here in the States, but with China making that concession on a major sticking point in U.S. trade talks, we are getting that shortened week off to a good start if you're long equities. We're going to ask Michael Hewson of CMC Markets where he sees progress now on the Phase 1 deal and what impact elections in Hong Kong could have as well. Pro-democracy candidates scored big in district council races there. Plus, LVMH is looking to give its investors a really big powder blue box. We're going to have details on the $16 billion+ purchase of Tiffany, now official. And it is decision time for Democrats now in the impeachment investigation into President Trump. Join me and Karen Moscow for more on all this coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. Anna.
Yeah, Nathan, breakfast, lunch and dinner at Tiffany's, perhaps, for Bernard Arnault.
No kidding.
In response to that, well, if you're paying that much, I'm sure you can eat what you like. Nathan, thank you very much. Nathan Hager, he'll be up next with Bloomberg Daybreak from New York. Or if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance. We'll get back to the trade narrative and the trade story in just a moment, but let's think about what's going on in the UK domestic story, because sterling is bid this morning, bid higher after the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson outlined centre-ground Conservative policies in his party's manifesto for next month's election, perhaps trying to avoid some of the pitfalls that befell his predecessor when she put out her manifesto in 2017 that involved a lot of big promises that put off the party faithful. At the same time, polls show Boris Johnson's party enjoying big leads over the Labour opposition. Let's talk about UK assets now. I'm joined by Jeffrey Yu, head of the UK Investment Office at UBS. Jeffrey, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Welcome to Bloomberg. Let's talk about UK assets in the context of an approach to the election on December the 12th. We see a big lead for the Conservative Party, and we see in the polls, that is, but we all know what happened in 2017. The polls weren't entirely accurate. So we see the pound going higher, but just by 0.3%. Where do you see UK assets heading in the run-up to December 12th?
I think oddly enough, compared to where we were a few weeks ago, the market's view towards the UK hasn't actually changed, even though, polling may have, shifted in one direction or another. And the view is that whatever happens, no deal risk, so a disruptive exit risk, has all but been priced out, right? So that move into the UK, be it through sterling, be it through the FTSE 250, etc., that has happened already. But to get to the next phase, so what would it take for markets to go not short, but to outright long, to outright overweight? That requires a lot of certainty, both on the future EU relationship, but on the domestic front. Right now, not taking any chances.
So if UK assets are priced out no deal, how quick before UK assets start to worry about December 2020?
So that is an interesting case. So there are two ways to look at this. One is clearly there is another risk of a cliff edge, as how some people have put it, and there's also a chance that this can be extended as well. Even though the Tories haven't committed to that for the time being. But on the other hand, there are two things which can mitigate the impact. And firstly, by December 2020, it's going to be over 4 years since the referendum, right? So rather than a sudden immediate shock, that gradual process probably mitigates the impact. And secondly, we know there'll be fiscal stimulus heading into that as well, which could also mitigate some of the downside impact. But ultimately, for the UK, it's not just about Brexit, it's about the global condition, and that's far more important right now.
Yeah, so fiscal stimulus certainly coming down the track, isn't it, Jeffrey, when we talk about the extent of the plans to spend from both the Conservatives and the Labour Party. Do you see a lot of appetite? I don't know if investors talk to you about the possibility of investing in infrastructure projects, because there seems to be a lot of talk about infrastructure spending in the UK, and it comes at a time when low interest rate environment globally means investors are increasingly looking for those alternative, less liquid assets. Is that part of the conversation?
Absolutely, not just for the UK, but globally as well. They look at valuations in listed assets, they look at valuations in bonds, equities, and almost automatically the minds go towards alternatives. So in particular in the private equity, that's always a space where they do look at, but also co-financing agreements. And this is where, especially for our clients, given their buying power, they may have a bit more flexibility. But we did have a similar story, after Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and even though stock markets did do well, actually it wasn't, I would say, the infrastructure, the industrial side, and which benefited the most. It was actually areas benefiting from tax reform and deregulation. So I think I'll just hold that thought for the time being, but ultimately fiscal stimulus, that will be able to mitigate some of the headwinds.
So that's part of the story. We are, of course, watching European equities move higher on the latest trade headlines. And one of the things that's caught the market's imagination over the weekend, then, Jeffrey, is these comments from the Chinese side suggesting that they will take breaches of intellectual property regulation more seriously. How significant is that because it had been a big stumbling block, hadn't it, in the trade talks?
I think we'll need to look at the details. Originally, some of the stumbling block was, the stumbling block was, I think on the US side, there was an anticipation that, China would actually change its legislation rather than through just simple administrative enforcement. So, there are matters there. I think, what China needs to do is actually come around to the view that it's not about, giving concessions, to the international investment community or to the Americans or anything. Protecting IP protects homegrown innovation. That is so crucial, and I think that's a message that China actually needs to understand itself, needs to send its vote of confidence in its domestic entrepreneurship, right? So I think as long as it gets past that block, then I think for China's development and for global trade tensions will be very beneficial as well. But for the time being, still things seem to be heading in the right direction.
How vulnerable are global stocks if we don't get a phase one trade deal, Jeffrey? Because we see, a third month of gains for global stocks. That looks as if what we're heading for in November as we edge towards the end of it. But the markets must be vulnerable given that ramp up has been very much around expectations of something to come.
Certainly. So there will be vulnerabilities, especially if things fall apart at the last minute. But at the same time, we have to see see the other exogenous conditions. We didn't have a dovish Fed, at this time last year, when markets really started to tilt over. We didn't, have, seemingly a new round of globally coordinated easing. There was far less talk of fiscal stimulus, for example, heading into electoral periods, should we say. So I'd say the non-trade exogenous environment is a lot different, maybe more supportive for markets, but again, that's a mitigate downside argument. It's not a very positive argument, and that's how we're positioned.
Really interesting. Yeah, there's a few guests have been flagging to me not to assume that a lot of this upside and this rally is all about trade. There's also the Fed and other central banks and their liquidity and stock buybacks in there as well. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us. Jeffrey Yu, head of UK Investment Office at UBS. If you're listening in for the next hour, then next up you'll have Daybreak with Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow out of New York. Or if you're listening in London on DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keane and Francine Lacroix. We'll no doubt on either of those platforms be bringing you plenty of coverage of the strong picture we're seeing for European equity markets today, up by 0.8%. This is Bloomberg.
In today's volatile markets,
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. We dropped off our Christmas shopping at the hotel. Then it was off to be spellbound at the Theatre Royal Bath. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Cold Monday mornings like this are cruel. You cough, you splutter, so does your car. Its battery dead, killed by an icy claw. Will anyone stand up to winter? Yes, you. Come to Halfords. We fit new batteries on the spot from just £15, and we're open late 7 days a week. See halfords.com for opening hours. Here in Wandsworth. Ready for the cold snap? Ready for anything. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Batteries sold separately. Selected vehicles only in most stores.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Batteries running low? Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, November 25th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks advance as China cracks down on intellectual property violations.
Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement scores an overwhelming victory in local elections.
LVMH and Tiffany make it official, striking the largest luxury deal ever.
And Carl Icahn ramps up pressure on Occidental Petroleum.
It's a big shakeup at the Pentagon. Navy Secretary Richard Spencer is ousted. I'm Michael Barr. That story and more straight ahead.
I'm John Stashower on sports. Make it 3 wins in a row for the Jets. They crushed the Raiders, make it 7 straight losses for the Giants. They fell in Chicago. The Nets beat the Knicks.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by Inovalon, a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare for insurance companies, physicians, pharmacy, and pharmaceutical companies. Inovalon, data has a story to tell. Inovalon gives it a voice.
And global stocks are gaining to start this holiday-shortened week. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 8 points this morning. Dow futures up 74, and NASDAQ futures up 30. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. CAC in Paris up 0.6%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.7%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 0.8%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong jumped to 1.5%. 10-year Treasury down 5/30 seconds, yield 1.78%. The yield on the 2-year, 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.2% or 12 cents at 57.89 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.3% or $4.10 at 14.6640 an ounce. The euro 1.1013 against the dollar. The yen is at 108.85. Nathan.
Hey, Karen, we begin this morning with a move from China to ease trade tensions with the U.S. Beijing says it will raise penalties on intellectual property violations, one of the sticking points in talks with Washington. We get details now from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Beijing.
They've said that they're going to look to lower the thresholds in terms of who they punish and what is punishable in terms of intellectual property theft. The other part of it is making it easier for victims of intellectual property theft to pursue claims of compensation. And more broadly, what we're hearing from Chinese officials is that they want by 2020 to significantly reduce the numbers and the instances of intellectual property theft.
Negotiators from the U.S. and China have been talking regularly, attempting to bridge differences on intellectual property rights, as well as the purchase of American farm products and other contentious issues.
As the two sides work toward a Phase 1 deal, they're leaving the more controversial issues for later discussions. Deborah Elms is Executive Director of the Asian Trade Center in Singapore.
I don't think we're going to see a deal personally until February because there are lots of holidays, there's lots of arguments for why this isn't going to happen. I think what they're trying to do, though, is have just enough progress so that they can postpone the December 15th tariff raise by the United States, and then eventually we might see a Phase 1 of some sort. But I'm really not holding my breath.
And last week, China's top trade negotiator said there are plans for reforming state enterprises and opening up the financial sector, issues at the core of U.S. demands.
In Hong Kong, pro-democracy candidates scored an overwhelming victory in local elections, winning 85% of the seats up for grabs. Turnout hit a record with twice as many votes cast as the last election. Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin has the very latest from Hong Kong.
The numbers speak for themselves. We had more than 71% turnout, 2.9 million people voting. This has been seen as a kind of barometer, a referendum really on the Carrie Lam government, on the protests that have been ongoing so far, this highly politicized background that these elections have taken place against. Things very different this time around because usually district council elections are pretty low key and in fact many people don't bother voting, but really the turnout this time shows that the sentiment has changed and people want to voice their opinions in this democratic process.
While district councils are the lowest rung of Hong Kong's government, the results could pressure city leaders to meet demands from the pro-democracy movement.
Election results in Hong Kong and that move from China to ease trade tensions helped give stocks in Asia a boost overnight. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. Developers and real estate stocks were among the top performers on Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index, which gained for a second session. Weakness in the yen boosted the Nikkei 225, while the CSI 300 closed higher on the Chinese mainland. South Korea's won led gains amongst Asian FX, and the Kospi was up 1% to 2,123 points amid the risk-on sentiment. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thanks. Turning to corporate news now, LVMH and Tiffany have struck a deal. The French companies agreed to buy Tiffany for more than $16 billion, the largest luxury deal ever. Dana Telsey is Chief Research Officer at Telsey Advisory Group.
The global reach that an LVMH and Tiffany have, certainly for Tiffany, given they're only $4.4 billion in sales, there's an opportunity. The bottom line is there's value in Tiffany, and as a brand that's well known, and it could have a faster rate of sales growth.
The acquisition gives LVMH added access to shoppers in the U.S. and Asia and more than doubles its jewelry scale. The deal is expected to close in the middle of next year.
And we have another acquisition to tell you about. Novartis has agreed to buy medicines company for about $9.7 billion. The move gives a promising cholesterol drug to Novartis and values medicines at a 45% premium to its price before talks were first reported.
Meanwhile, HP is rejecting a request from Xerox to open its financial books. That's after turning down its unsolicited merger offer last week. HP says Xerox hasn't proven it can raise enough funding to complete a transaction.
Occidental Petroleum is under pressure from Carl Icahn. Sources say the activist investor plans to nominate 10 directors to try to seize control of the board. Icahn owns a $1 billion stake in Occidental and plans to make his move before a Friday deadline for nominations.
Shares of Tesla are up 3.5% in early trading after CEO Elon Musk said orders for the new Cybertruck hit 200,000. Just $100 deposits required for an order, and the amount is fully refundable. Tesla itself says the metric isn't relevant and has stopped giving reservation figures on its earnings calls.
And shares of Uber are down 5% in early trading after reports that London won't renew a license for the ride-hailing company. City AM in London says the city will announce the decision imminently. Futures this morning moving higher. S&P futures are up 8 points. Dow futures up 75. NASDAQ futures up 30. And the 10-year Treasury down 5/30 seconds, yield 1.78%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr to get more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Former Navy Secretary Richard Spencer says he and President Donald Trump no longer share the same understanding of what Spencer calls the key principle of good order and discipline. Spencer made that claim in a letter to Trump after the chief of the Pentagon fired him amid a dispute over the fate of a SEAL accused of war crimes in Iraq. Trump has championed the SEAL's case, overruling Eddie Gallagher's demotion. Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin is one of President Trump's staunchest allies. Zeldin on CNN State of the Union was asked, as a combat veteran, how he felt about Gallagher's reinstatement.
For President Trump, or whether it's a past president or a future president, as the commander-in-chief, it is their prerogative if they want to defend somebody like this who has really gone through a lot to earn those types of awards.
Espert learned Spencer had privately proposed to the White House to restore Gallagher's rank and allow him to retire with the Trident pin while the Navy pursued disciplinary actions at odds with his public position on the issue. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg announced he is running for the Democratic presidential nomination, offering his own mix of moderate policy stances and experience in business, government, and philanthropy as the way to beat President Donald Trump. Bloomberg, who is 77, called Trump an existential threat to our country and our values as he joined a crowded field of candidates with fewer than 3 months before the Iowa caucuses. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Rudy Giuliani, a focus of the impeachment inquiry into President Trump's foreign policy dealings, suggested he has dirt on the Biden family that would be released were he to get into trouble. Giuliani earlier hinted that he has a plan if he should fall out of favor with the president. Giuliani on Fox News says he won't be anyone's scapegoat.
You can assume that I talk to him early and often and have a very, very good relationship with him, and all of these comments, which are totally insulting. I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus. When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
Giuliani says he was being sarcastic. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:09 on Wall Street. Time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, what's gotten into the Jets? They lost to lowly Miami. They were 1-7 now after their first 3-game winning streak since 2015. They're only 2 games out of a playoff spot. The Raiders came to MetLife looking for a win that would get them into a tie for first. They went home 34-3 losers. The Jets pulled away with 3 touchdowns in the third quarter. Sam Darnold, 30 of 39, 315 yards, 2 TDs.
Confidence is, it's high. I think they started in practice, though. It starts with a week of preparation, and I don't think, we had a we had a lot of confidence, at the beginning of the season. Even though the record didn't show, we still had a ton of confidence going into all those games. For us, especially as an offense, it's about executing, and we've been doing that.
The next two games are against the Bengals and the rematch with the Dolphins, two teams with a combined record of 2-20. The Bengals, only team in the NFL with a worse record and a longer losing streak than the Giants, who in Chicago scored first and last, but in between those two Giant touchdowns, the Bears outscored them 19-0. Giants couldn't muster a single first down in the third quarter. Daniel Jones had his usual costly fumble. Saquon Barkley, again, didn't do much, and Aldrick Rosas missed two makeable field goals. The Giants' seventh loss in a row. The Patriots used their stingy defense to get by Dallas 13-9. Last night, the 49ers crushed Green Bay 37-8. New England and San Francisco, both the league leading 10-1. The Nets, still without Kyrie Irving, have their first three-game winning streak. They beat the Knicks at the Garden 103-101. College hoops, St. John's over UMass 78-63. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. Looking at equities on the rise around the world as Wall Street heads into a holiday-shortened week. S&P futures are higher by 7 points. Dow futures a gain of 72. NASDAQ futures up by 28 points. The 10-year is down for 30 seconds, yield 1.78%. The 2-year Treasury, 1.63% yield. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. Next, we donned our skates for Bath on ice. I'm a natural. Didn't have to hold on to anything or anyone. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
There are plenty of parties over the festive period. They'll have food and drink, music too. Some will even have rides and fireworks. But one has all that, plus a big something extra. Big Game 12 is London's biggest rugby party. To watch Harlequins take on Leicester Tigers from just £17 a ticket for children and £27 for adults, go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12. Kick-off 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December, Twickenham Stadium.
Next. Nah. Nope. Boring. If you skip through loads of your TV channels, why are you paying loads of money for them? With TalkTalk TV and Faster Fibre, you can access the nation's favourite TV shows, a world of films and sport, live and on demand, all for £25.95 a month for 18 months. And if you're quick, you'll even get a year of Amazon Prime on us. Search TalkTalk TV. TalkTalk, for everyone. Offer ends 5th of December, subject to availability. T's and C's apply.
In celebration of the release of Disney's Frozen 2, we invite you to live your family winter adventure with Marriott Bonvoy. When you book a stay and eat at one of our hotels, up to 2 kids under 12 stay and eat for free. Magical destinations across Europe are waiting for you. So get ready for your unforgettable holiday with Marriott Bonvoy. Disney's Frozen 2 in cinemas now. Offer ends 27th December 2019. Terms and conditions apply. See marriott.co.uk for more details.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Taylor Briggs.
Splunk is the world's first data-to-everything platform. Its software collects machine data and provides insight into businesses worldwide. Joining us for an exclusive interview, it is Splunk President and CEO, Doug Merritt. I wanted to talk about this new pricing model, the volume-based and then booking the revenue annually instead of on a multi-year basis. Both of those analysts love today. Why the change?
One of the biggest issues we've had with Splunk is you get so much value out of the platform, and it's a data volume-based product that people get scared on how much volume is going to go through. And we've heard for years that the lack of predictability is something they'd want to have a better option around. And so we came out with 2 pricing metrics a month and change ago that were one's an enhancement, one is new. The enhancement for data volume contracts is we've tiered the pricing and really condensed the tiers into much broader bands with an unlimited option at the upper end of that pricing curve. The alternative, which is probably more fundamentally appropriate long term, is just the amount of infrastructure that you need to operate the product. We rolled both out because the way they use the product could make one more advantageous for a customer versus the other.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We continue to watch shares of Uber Technologies this morning, down 6.5% after London's Transit Authority refused to grant it a new license to operate in the city. Stocks, meanwhile, are climbing globally, along with U.S. stock index futures, as investors digest China's decision to tighten intellectual property rules, a move that may boost the chances of a trade deal between the world's largest economies. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 76, NASDAQ futures up 30. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 4/30 seconds, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil little change, down 2 cents at 57.74 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.3% or $4.70 at 14.65.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1013 against the dollar. British pound 1.2881 and the yen at 108.85. And today we're looking for earnings from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has fired the Secretary of the Navy in connection with the controversy over a SEAL whose case has been championed by President Trump. A Pentagon spokesman says that Esper has lost trust and confidence in Navy Secretary Richard Spencer regarding his lack of candor over conversations with the White House involving the Eddie Gallagher case. Turkey will test a component of its newly acquired Russian air defense system. The move risks escalating a dispute with the U.S. and touching off possible sanctions. In the NFL, the Jets won against the Raiders 34-3. The Giants lost, the Patriots, 49ers, and the Redskins won. The Ravens are at the Rams tonight. In the NBA, the Nets hang on to beat the Knicks 103-101. The Wizards lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's 5:19 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Michael Houston joins us now, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets. Always good to talk with you, Michael. Thanks for being with us. We're seeing a lift to equities around the world this morning with China promising to raise raise the penalties on intellectual property theft. How crucial is this as a concession when it comes to actually getting a phase one deal over the line, do you think?
Well, yeah, good morning. I'm not sure it's that crucial with respect to a phase one deal. I think this is something that's probably going to need to be thrashed out in terms of a phase two deal. And I wouldn't get too carried away with it, because at the moment we don't have an awful lot of details. And need I remind your listeners that only a few months ago the trade talks broke down on the basis of an enforcement mechanism. So it's all very well China saying that it's going to lower the thresholds for criminal punishment when it comes to the theft of IP, as well as increasing penalties on companies who steal IP. What's the enforcement mechanism going to be? And more importantly, will the US wind back tariffs as a result of this concession? I will say that it is positive, and certainly markets are reflecting that. The DAX is higher, the CAC 40 is higher, as is the FTSE 100. But I think there's also an element of a little bit of M&A helping boost the Paris market as well.
In terms of the LVMH Tiffany deal you're thinking there. But in terms of the phase one deal, are you less optimistic than the market seems to be that part of it actually gets done before the year ends?
I don't think it'll get done before the year end. I think there's still a big unknown with respect to what happens with these 15th of December tariffs, and I certainly don't think it's in the president's interest to conclude a phase one deal quite yet. We're still just under a year away from a potential this presidential election, and I think if he draws a line under the China-US phase one, then where's he got to go to next? I mean, let's not forget also that even in the event that we agree a China-US phase one deal, it still needs to be signed off by US policymakers as well as Chinese policymakers. Let's not forget USMCA actually hasn't been signed off yet, and that was agreed a year ago.
So are you thinking there's a risk that stocks could be getting overbought here on trade optimism?
At the moment, yeah, they are overbought, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can't go higher. When I actually look at the way markets are trading at the moment, the momentum is positive. The Fed is adding liquidity. That liquidity is going into the markets, and markets are going higher. And if you look at gold prices, if you look at US Treasuries, there's no what I would call fear coming into the market that markets are not likely to go higher. And as we head into year end, traditionally, that tends to be a fairly decent performing quarter for stocks, if you knock out, obviously, what happened last year.
Where do you see opportunity in UK stocks as we get closer to the general election there? Obviously, the Conservative Party just put out its manifesto. Are you thinking that that's positive for equities?
I think if we get a positive outcome on December the 12th, and by way of positive outcome I mean a Conservative majority, then I certainly think the FTSE 100 is undervalued relative to its peers. We could see a significant rebound in house builders, in energy stocks, in any stocks that are essentially hallmarked for potential nationalisation by the Labour Party, because there is a significant discount there. So I would certainly argue that in the event of a Conservative majority, the FTSE 100 should see, and the FTSE 250, should see a nice uplift on the back of any sort of positive result that way.
So in our last minute here, while we head toward the election and the possibility of tariffs being put in place on schedule on the 15th, where are you advising your clients to put their money at this point?
Well, unfortunately for me, I'm not in the position to be able to do that. But what I would certainly argue is that at the moment, UK stocks are looking fairly decent value. Obviously, that is dependent on a positive election outcome. Certainly, I don't expect those tariffs to kick in. I think they will get rolled over. And as such, I think we'll see a broad-based rally pretty much across all of the sectors.
Always good getting your insights, Michael, on Bloomberg Daybreak. Thanks for being with us. That's Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst for CMC Markets. As we look at green on the screen for equities around the world, S&P futures are higher by 7.5 points. That's a gain of 0.25%. Dow futures higher by 73 points. NASDAQ futures up by almost 30 points now. DAX in Germany, CAC in Paris, both up about 0.5%. The 10-year is down 4/32 in the U.S. The Treasury yield for the 10-year is at 1.78% and the 2 years at 1.63%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. It's official. Louis Vuitton owner LVMH is buying the iconic U.S. luxury jeweler Tiffany for $16 billion. It's the largest ever deal in the luxury sector. The French company, which has a stable of 75 brands, including Christian Dior and Dom Perignon Champagne, agreed to pay $135 per share for Tiffany after raising its bid at least twice before. And there's a major acquisition in the drug industry. The Swiss drug giant Novartis has agreed to buy New Jersey-based medicines company for $9.7 billion, snapping up a promising experimental cholesterol drug and adding to a string of recent acquisitions. The stock futures point to a higher open this morning ahead of the Thanksgiving holiday this week as investors assess China's decision to tighten intellectual property rules, a move that may boost the chances of a trade deal between the U.S. and China. Dow futures up 75. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
I've got to tell you about our beautiful city break in Bath. Midweek is the perfect time to beat the crowds. Just an hour and a half by train from London. It was so relaxing. We headed straight for Bath Christmas Market. Oh, I can still smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine from the chalets. We dropped off our Christmas shopping at the hotel. Then it was off to be spellbound at the Theatre Royal Bath. There's so much to do in Bath. I'm already planning my next trip.
Discover the magic of Bath this Christmas. Plan ahead at visitbath.co.uk/Christmas.
Where would we be without you? The butchers, the bakers, the digital future makers. From BLTs to MOTs, you're the companies that keep us all going. So mind your business, London. And so will we, with annual reviews to keep you on our best possible tariff. Because deal or no deal, from Downing Street to the High Street, every business is part of something far, far bigger. Find out how HSBC could help you at business.hsbc.uk/mindyourbusiness, based on an annual review of activity for businesses with up to a £2 million turnover.
Something explosive is coming to the home of rugby. When Harlequins meet Leicester Tigers, expect fireworks. With tickets from £17 children and £27 adults, Big Game 12 is more than a Gallagher Premiership rugby fixture. It's London's biggest rugby party. Enjoy music, entertainment and a truly incredible atmosphere before the big game kicks off at 4:30pm, Saturday 28th of December at Twickenham Stadium. Go to tickets.quins.co.uk or search Big Game 12.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
At Amazon this Christmas, you'll find loads of gifting ideas for everyone. You can get the Dell XPS touchscreen laptop, Philips Lumia Prestige IPL, and the Fitbit Versa 2 smartwatch. All with low prices and free UK delivery on eligible orders over £20. So there'll be more, and more.
Oh, how did you guess?
Amazon, delivering all you need this Christmas for less.
Live live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Stocks are rising around the world as the latest move from China may help ease trade tensions with the U.S. Beijing says it'll raise penalties on those who steal intellectual property. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
This is one of the sticking points in trade talks with the United States. These guidelines aim to stop frequent violations by 2022 and make it easier for victims to get compensation. China will also look at lowering the thresholds for criminal punishment for those who steal IP. The U.S. wants China to commit to cracking down on IP theft, and this is a step in that direction. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thanks. Also in Hong Kong, pro-democracy candidates scored an overwhelming victory in local elections, winning 85% of the seats up for grabs. Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin has the very latest from Hong Kong.
There was an overwhelming support for the pro-democracy camp. I mean, if you look at some of the results being reported by local media, Stan News saying 388 seats out of 452 taken by pro-democracy candidates. So really a sweeping change there for the district councils in Hong Kong.
Turnout also hit a record with twice as many votes cast as the last local race in Hong Kong.
Plenty of deal news this Monday. We begin with LVMH agreeing to buy Tiffany for more than $16 billion. It's the largest luxury deal ever, and it has shares of Tiffany up more than 6% in early trading.
And shares of New Jersey-based medicines company are also much higher now by 22.5%. It's being bought by Novartis for $9.7 billion.
HP is rejecting a Xerox request to open its financial books. That's after HP turned down its unsolicited merger offer last week.
Carl Icahn is trying to seize control of Occidental Petroleum's board. Bloomberg News has learned the activist investor plans to nominate a slate of 10 directors.
Shares of Uber are down 5.5% this morning after London refused to grant the company a new license. Uber has 21 days to appeal and can continue to operate in London while a court considers the decision.
And shares of Tesla are up more than 3% after Elon Musk said orders for the Cybertruck climbed to $200,000. Just a $100 fully refundable deposit is required for an order.
Now let's get you up to date on how stocks are faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8 points this morning. Dow futures up 77. NASDAQ futures up 30. The DAX in Germany's up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 3/32, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:33 on Wall Street, and let's bring in Michael Barr to get a check of what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Defense Secretary Mark Esper asked and received the resignation of Navy Secretary Richard Spencer over his handling of the case of a Navy SEAL accused of war crimes in Iraq that angered President Donald Trump. In a statement last evening, the Pentagon says that Spencer had gone behind Secretary Esper's back, proposing a deal to the White House that would allow Gallagher to retire with a trident pen. Gallagher, while acquitted of killing a wounded ISIS captive earlier this year, was sentenced to 4 months of time served and a reduction in rank for posing with a corpse during a 2017 deployment to Iraq. He will get to retire as a Navy SEAL. The chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, says the inquiry into President Trump may go on longer than the impeachment process itself. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Schiff says he doesn't know whether more witnesses will be called.
I certainly think that the evidence that's been produced overwhelmingly shows serious misconduct by the president. But I do want to hear more from my constituents, and I want to hear more from my colleagues. This is not a decision I will be making alone.
Schiff on CNN says he'd like John Bolton to testify. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg announced he is running for the Democratic presidential nomination. Bloomberg, who is 77, called President Trump an existential threat to our country and our values as he joined a crowded field of candidates with fewer than 3 months before the Iowa caucuses. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. A Taunus County, Alabama sheriff was killed over the weekend by an 18-year-old who allegedly shot the officer. Apparently, Sheriff John Williams was shot for requesting the teen to turn down his loud music. President of the Alabama Sheriff's Association, Heath Taylor.
Sheriff Williams answered a noise complaint at a convenience store. He confronted the individuals that had the loud music playing. They got into an altercation, and as a result of that altercation, Sheriff Williams was fatally shot and died there at the scene.
The suspect, William Chase Johnson, was apprehended several hours after the incident when he returned to the crime scene. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is discharged from a Baltimore hospital and is said to be home and doing well after being hospitalized with chills and a fever. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. Coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, the Jets had put together a couple of victories, but they were against very bad teams, the Giants and Redskins. The test was yesterday. Oakland came in 6-4, winners of 3 straight, looking to move into first place, and the Jets won 34-3. So not only their third straight win, but their third in a row, scoring exactly 34 points. Sam Darnold, of course, missed 3 games early in the year, was affected a couple others by the mono, but he was terrific yesterday. 20 of 29, 315 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns, ran for another. He outplayed Derek Carr, who got pulled in the third quarter after Brian Poole's pick 6. The Jets' next 2 games are against the winless Bengals and then the 2-9 Dolphins, who did beat the Jets last month. The Giants' woes continue. A 19-14 loss in Chicago. Their 7th straight loss. Another quiet game for Saquon Barkley. Has not had near the season he had as a rookie a year ago. In his previous game, Barkley had only 1 yard rushing, and this one he had only 1 yard receiving. The Giants' quarterback is Daniel Jones.
I think I got to do a better job finding him when he's open and getting the ball accurately. I think defenses are certainly aware of what he can do in the pass game and account for that and the way they play him. But I got to do a better job getting him the ball.
Jones and the Giants 2-9. Next Sunday they play Green Bay. The Packers will not be in a good mood. They lost last night at San Francisco 37-8. The 49ers stay atop the NFC at 10-1. The Patriots are 10-1. In the rain, they beat Dallas 13-9. At the Garden, the Nets held off the Knicks 103-101. Brooklyn's third straight win. St. John's beat UMass 78-63. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower.
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on Google at war, how the company is fighting with employees over doing business with the government. Also in this week's issue, a UK Supreme Court case seeking to hold Barclays responsible for sexual assaults that took place decades ago. Max Abelson wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
These people said that Dr. Bates sexually assaulted them, about 120 of them, and they wanted to hold Barclays responsible because Barclays had sent them to him.
Read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can subscribe to the magazine at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. 5:38 on Wall Street. Time now for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, Nathan. A new SWAT team of inspectors is working in New York City. The New York Times says they swoop in to look for any safety lapses that often result in hefty fines or even work stoppages. New London, Connecticut officials say a newly revitalized city facade improvement program is providing financial incentives for the rehab of old downtown structures and is paying dividends. 3 downtown building owners were recently given matching grant funds for work at their properties. Fitch Ratings has downgraded more than $1 billion worth of debt sold by 4 public universities in New Jersey. Fitch cites several concerns ranging from enrollment declines to reliance on state support. That's the Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thank you, Ed. 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on 1010 Wins in New York, we're talking about the $16 billion takeover of Tiffany's by France's LVMH.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KFAB in Omaha. Tyson Foods and Cargill are promising ambitious reductions in emissions
emissions, including in supply chains.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WLW in Cincinnati, I'm reporting Carl Icahn is seeking control of Occidental Petroleum's board of directors.
I'm Caroline Hetko on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on Uber being denied a license to operate in London with only 21 days to appeal.
I'm Ed Gorey on KFBK in Sacramento. I'm reporting orders for Tesla's Cybertruck have risen to 200,000.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Another item we're watching, a smattering of earnings on the way. We get results from about a dozen companies in the S&P 500 this week, including Best Buy, Dollar Tree, and HP. Bloomberg customers can check the full earnings calendar on the terminal by typing ACDR GO. Right now, S&P futures are higher by almost 8 points. Dow futures up 76. NASDAQ futures higher by nearly 30 points. 10 years down, 3/32. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, 1.78%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills, the kind of skills that companies need to build real products, and the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. The co-working business model may be flawed.
You're talking about a business where there's no barrier to entry.
And billionaire real estate investor Sam Zell says the track record hasn't been too good for companies that have tried it.
You go back to the 1950s, it started with Fijian. Fijian was the first one who did the equivalent of a co-working space. Mm-hmm. Fijian went broke. Followed by Headquarters. It went broke. Followed by Regis. It went broke. Followed by WeWork. It went broke.
And Zell says that doesn't bode well for others.
Tell me about a model that works when every player in the space has gone broke. It's just a question of when.
Rivals including IWG, Industrious, Novel, and Notel are now pitching themselves as more stable providers of flexible office space for landlords in cities including New York, Los Angeles, and other major metros. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers challenges and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change. Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while the business has evolved, has your accountant stayed behind? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and meet your financial goals. Let Burden use their insight to create innovative tax solutions for your family and your business. Visit burdenllp.com to get started. BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, has been fired in connection with the controversy over a Navy SEAL whose case has been championed by President Trump.
Sunday evening, the president tweeted, "I was not pleased with the way Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher's trial was handled by the Navy." Later adding, "Therefore, Secretary of the Navy Richard Spencer's services have been terminated. Eddie will retire peacefully with all of the honors that he has earned, including his Trident pin." Bob Costantini, Washington.
In Hong Kong District Council elections, the pro-democracy opposition has swept a resounding victory.
Now, we are the majority in the District Council to show our cause on freedom and democracy.
Pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong. Back here at home, billionaire Michael Bloomberg has announced his candidacy for the Democratic presidential nomination. He may be forced to sell businesses he owns to avoid conflicts of interest. On Wall Street, the Dow is higher, 109 points. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Stocks climbing globally along with U.S. stock index futures as investors digest China's decision to tighten intellectual property rules, a move that may boost the chances of a trade deal between the world's largest economies. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 79, NASDAQ futures up 31. The DAX in Germany's up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 4/32, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil is little changed at $57.78 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.4% or $5.10 at $14.6540 an ounce. The euro 1.1015 against the dollar. British pound 1.2882 and the yen at 108.85. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Navy Secretary Richard Spencer has been ousted by Secretary of Defense Mark Esper. It was over Spencer's handling of the case involving Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, who, though he was acquitted of killing a wounded ISIS captive, was sentenced to 4 months of time served for posing with a corpse during a deployment in Iraq. President Trump publicly criticized the Navy for launching a review that could have stripped the decorated veteran of his status as a Navy SEAL. Former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg says he's joining the Democratic field running for president. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. In the NFL, the Jets won against the Raiders 34-3. The Giants lost. The Patriots, 49ers, and Redskins won. The Ravens are at the Rams tonight. In the NBA, the Nets hang on to beat the Knicks 103-101. The Wizards lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 5:49 on Wall Street, and it is time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion columnist Andrea Felstead joins us from our London bureau this morning on the move by LVMH to buy Tiffany & Company. Good morning, Andrea. This acquisition is valued at more than $16 billion, quite a bit higher than the first offer LVMH put to Tiffany. So the question is the price right now?
Well, the original offer at $120 a share was always a bit too skinny to win this deal. They had to increase proposal last week to $130 per share. Now they've gone to $135. So they've just sweetened it a little bit to get it over the line. It's interesting that it's still below the record high in July 2018 of just under $140 per share. So, you know, LVMH is paying, but it's got a recommendation. It's got goodwill. As for Tiffany shareholders, they're getting out pretty close to the high at a time when the outlook is worsening.
Do you think Tiffany should hold out for that high?
No, I think if LVMH walked away, we haven't seen a counter bidder come in, then I think it would really struggle to get the shares up to even the lower level. The shares were $98.55 before Bloomberg News broke the news of the deal. That it hasn't been going terribly well for Tiffany. Plus, you've got the worry of, you know, will the US slow down next year? So I think this, you know, at this price, this is a pretty good deal for both sides.
Well, even just below the record high, obviously LVMH is going to be paying a pretty big premium here to try to turn Tiffany around. What are the challenges for LVMH as this deal goes forward?
The challenge is it's really got to reinvigorate the Tiffany brand. Tiffany has been doing all the right things. It's been trying to elevate its products. It's been trying to make them appeal to younger shoppers, but it just hasn't really paid off yet. So LVMH will be able to turbocharge those. It will be able to take Tiffany up market. It will be able to put its marketing clout behind it. And most importantly, it will be able to increase Tiffany's sales in Asia to those Chinese millennial customers, which are driving most of the growth in the luxury industry.
That could be a tall task, though, couldn't it, when we have signs around the world that the economy overall is slowing down? I mean, luxury tends to be the first thing to go to the wayside in an environment like this.
That's true, but the luxury has actually been quite resilient in whatever's going on. And luxury is all, at the moment, it's all about appealing to those younger customers. It's all about newness and excitement. Gucci had a remarkable revival. If LVMH can work its magic on Tiffany, create a halo around the brand, make it exciting, then it's got a good chance even in this market. And we've seen what it's done with Dior. It bought the shares it didn't own in Dior a few years ago, and it's really revived that brand. And Dior is absolutely red hot right now. So it still has a good chance. You know, it will be tough. No one's saying this is going to be easy, but if anyone can do it, I do think LVMH can.
But does the size of a company like Tiffany pose more challenges for LVMH despite its track record of turning smaller luxury brands around?
Definitely. It's a much bigger company. It's got a much broader customer base than, say, Bulgari, which it acquired a few years ago. So it will need a lot more work, and it will need a lot of investment up front to really reinvigorate that brand and get those new jewellery ranges really working. So it will be a lot of upfront investment, and it will be hard work.
Bloomberg Opinion columnist Andrea Felstead, thanks for being with us from our London bureau this morning. And you can read more from Bloomberg Opinion, including Andrea's latest column. It's called Tiffany is Worth the $16 billion Extravagance. Just go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Businesses in California will have to reevaluate their customer loyalty programs. Starting in January, consumers in the state will be able to request that the data they provide to companies in exchange for discounts and other perks be deleted. Deer Hunter hunters in Wisconsin will have a new purpose. Deer killed near a former Johnson Controls facility will be tested for chemical contamination. The National Labor Relations Board ruled the firing of a worker by an excavating company in Iowa was illegal. The worker was cut because of union activity.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story we're watching. General Motors slapping Fiat Chrysler with a racketeering lawsuit accusing it of bribing United Auto Workers brass in a years-long corruption scheme. For more on the move, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with former federal prosecutor and current Wayne State University law professor Peter Henning.
Big automakers are used to dealing with major litigation brought by regulators and consumers, but not by one another and not involving racketeering.
Well, what General Motors is doing is taking a very aggressive position, and they are claiming that because of corruption in the UAW and in the upper reaches of Fiat Chrysler, that Fiat Chrysler got a much better deal in the 2015 labor agreement than General Motors did, and that gave them a much better cost advantage over General Motors. They even have a graphic in the complaint showing the differences between what Fiat Chrysler had to pay for its workers, including temporary workers, and what General Motors had to pay. So this is a rarity, certainly, where you see a RICO lawsuit filed against a competitor. It's just not done very often, and that's going to be a challenge for General Motors in trying to prove their case.
Exactly. So explain what they have to prove and how that might be difficult when they've had such success in the last decade.
Well, that's going to be the interesting point here, is that for any RICO lawsuit, you have to show that there was a pattern of racketeering activity. Well, I think they have pretty good evidence of that from all the guilty pleas, and that there was a RICO enterprise. But the key to any RICO lawsuit is proving that General Motors was harmed in its business or property. And given how well General Motors has done over the last 10 years since they emerged from bankruptcy, I'm not sure they're going to be able to show that the agreement that Fiat Chrysler made with the UAW actually harmed General Motors. That's going to be the major sticking point here. How are they going to show that they were hurt by an agreement made between Fiat Chrysler and the UAW? So that, I think, is the biggest challenge that General Motors faces in this case, is proving that their business and their property was harmed by what Fiat Chrysler did.
And that's Wayne State University law professor Peter Henning speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And we continue to watch shares of Uber this morning. They're down more than 5% after London's Transit Authority refused to grant it a new license to operate in the city. Meanwhile, futures are higher, with S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 76, and NASDAQ futures up about 30. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
I love Black Friday. Busy shops, crazy people, average deals. It's so much fun.
Said no one ever. So be savvy and do Black Friday the easy way with Smarty. Grab a huge 100 gig data SIM for just £17 a month on the Mega Plan. And with no credit checks, speed restrictions or contracts tying you down, you can kick back with the best Black Friday deal around. Now that's Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile to find out more, but hurry, as this deal won't be around for long. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition. For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista, who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
At Lidl, we're big on all those Christmas parties. The season to be jolly. Try our Party Time Indian snack selection for only $2.99. And our Party Time mac and cheese bites for just $1.19. Big on a Christmas you can believe it. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores excludes an eye.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, November 25th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
Global stocks advance as China cracks down on intellectual property violations.
Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement scores an overwhelming victory in local elections.
LVMH and Tiffany make it official, striking the largest luxury deal ever.
And Carl Icahn ramps up pressure on Occidental Petroleum.
It's a big shakeup at the Pentagon. Navy Secretary Richard Spencer is ousted. I'm Michael Barr. That story and more straight ahead.
I'm John Stashower on sports, making 3 wins in a row for the Jets. They crushed the Raiders, make it 7 straight losses for the Giants. They fell in Chicago. The Nets beat the Knicks.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stocks are gaining to start this holiday-shortened week. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 7.5 points this morning. Dow futures up 75. NASDAQ futures up 30. The DAX in Germany's up 1/3%. CAC in Paris up 0.4%. And the FTSE 100 up 0.7%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 0.8%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong jumped 1.5%. 10-year Treasury down 5/30 seconds, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year, 1.63%. NYMEX crude oil is little changed, up less than 0.1% or 4 cents at $57.81 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.4% or $5.80 at $14.6470 an ounce. The euro at 1.1012 against the dollar. The yen at 108.84. And this headline crossing the Bloomberg: Charles Schwab to buy TD Ameritrade for about $26 billion. Nathan.
Karen, thanks. Meanwhile, we begin with a move from China to ease trade tensions with the U.S. Beijing says it will raise penalties on intellectual property violations, one of the sticking points in talks with Washington. We get details now from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Beijing.
They've said that they're going to look to lower the thresholds in terms of who they punish and what is punishable in terms of intellectual property theft. The other part of it is making it easier for victims of intellectual property theft to pursue claims of compensation. And more broadly, what we're hearing from Chinese officials is that they want by 2020 to significantly reduce the numbers and the instances of intellectual property theft.
Negotiators from the U.S. and China have been talking regularly, attempting to bridge differences on several issues.
And as the two sides work toward a phase one deal, they're leaving the most controversial items for later discussions. Deborah Elms is executive director of the Asian Trade Center in Singapore.
I don't think we're going to see a deal personally until February because there are lots of holidays. There's lots of arguments for why this isn't going to happen. I think what they're trying to do, though, is have just enough progress so that they can postpone the December 15th tariff raise by the United States. And then eventually we might see a phase one of some sort. But I'm really not holding my breath.
Last week, China's top trade negotiator said there are plans to reform state enterprises and open up the financial sector, issues at the core of U.S. demands.
In Hong Kong, pro-democracy candidates scored a big victory in local elections, winning 85% of the seats up for grabs. Turnout hit a record with twice as many votes cast as the last election. Bloomberg's Rosalind Chin has the very latest from Hong Kong.
The numbers speak for themselves. We had more than 71% turnout, 2.9 million people voting. This has been seen as a kind of barometer, a referendum really on the Carrie Lam government, on the protests that have been ongoing so far. This highly politicized background that these elections have taken place against. Things very different this time around because usually district council elections are pretty low key and in fact many people don't bother voting. But really the turnout this time shows that the sentiment has changed and people want to voice their opinions in this democratic process.
While district councils are the lowest rung of Hong Kong's government, the results could pressure leaders to meet demands from the pro-democracy movement.
Election results in Hong Kong and that move from China to ease trade tensions helped give stocks in Asia a boost overnight. And Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. Developers and real estate stocks were among the top performers on Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index, which gained for a second session. Weakness in the yen boosted the Nikkei 225, while the CSI 300 closed higher on the Chinese mainland. South Korea's won led gains amongst Asian FX, and the Kospi was up 1% to 2,123 points. Amid the risk-on sentiment. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Juliet. Turning to corporate news now, LVMH and Tiffany have struck a deal. The French companies agreed to buy Tiffany for more than $16 billion, the largest luxury deal ever. Dana Telsey is Chief Research Officer at Telsey Advisory Group.
The global reach that an LVMH and Tiffany have, certainly for Tiffany, given they're only $4.4 billion in sales, there's an opportunity. The bottom line is there's value in Tiffany, and as a brand that's well known, and it could have a faster rate of sales growth.
The acquisition gives LVMH added access to shoppers in the U.S. and Asia and more than doubles its jewelry scale.
We have another acquisition to tell you about. Novartis has agreed to buy medicines company for about $9.7 billion. The move gives Novartis a promising cholesterol drug and values medicines at a 45% premium to its price before talks were reported.
Meanwhile, HP is rejecting a request from Xerox to open its financial books. That's after turning down its unsolicited merger offer last week. HP says Xerox hasn't proven it can raise enough funding to complete a transaction.
Occidental Petroleum is under pressure from Carl Icahn. Sources say the activist investor plans to nominate 10 directors to try to seize control of the board. Icahn owns a $1 billion stake in Occidental and plans to make his move before a Friday deadline for nominations.
Shares of Uber are down more than 5.5% in early trading after London refused to grant the company a new license. Uber has 21 days to appeal and can continue operating in London while a court considers the decision.
Shares of Tesla are up more than 3.5% after CEO Elon Musk said orders for the new Cybertruck hit 200,000. Just a $100 deposit is required for an order, and the amount is fully refundable. Tesla itself says the metric is not relevant and has stopped giving reservation figures on its earnings call.
All right, now let's bring you more on that deal for Charles Schwab to buy TD Ameritrade. The price, $26 billion. TD Bank is expected to hold about a 13% stake in the combined entity. Schwab says integration of the two companies should take anywhere from 18 to 36 months. TD Bank will have the right to name 2 new seats on the Schwab board of directors. S&P futures are higher by almost 8 points now. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. It's 6:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Former Navy Secretary Richard Spencer says he and President Donald Trump no longer share the same understanding of what Spencer calls the key principle of good order and discipline. Spencer made that claim in a letter to Trump after the chief of the Pentagon fired him amid a dispute over the fate of a SEAL accused of war crimes in Iraq. Trump has championed the SEAL's case, overruling Eddie Gallagher's demotion. Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin is one of President Trump's staunchest allies. Zeldin on CNN State of the Union was asked as a combat veteran how he felt about Gallagher's reinstatement.
For President Trump, or whether it's a past president or a future president, as the commander-in-chief, it is their prerogative if they want to defend somebody like this who has really gone through a lot to earn those types of awards.
Esper learned Spencer had privately proposed to the White House to restore Gallagher's rank and allow him to retire with his trident pen, while the Navy pursued disciplinary actions at odds with his public position on the issue. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg announced he is running for the Democratic presidential nomination, offering his own mix of moderate policy stances and experience in business, government, and philanthropy as the way to beat President Donald Trump. Bloomberg, who is 77, called Trump an existential threat to our country and our values as he joined a crowded field of candidates with fewer than 3 months before the Iowa caucuses. Michael Bloomberg is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg Radio. Rudy Giuliani, a focus of the impeachment inquiry into President Trump's foreign policy dealings, suggested he has dirt on the Biden family that would be released were he to get into trouble. Giuliani earlier hinted that he has a plan if he should fall out of favor with the president. Giuliani on Fox News says he won't be anyone's scapegoat.
You can assume that I talk to him early and often and have a very, very good relationship with him, and all of these comments, which are totally insulting. I mean, I've seen things written like, he's going to throw me under the bus. When they say that, I say, he isn't, but I have insurance.
Giuliani says he was being sarcastic. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, what's gotten into the Jets? They lost to lowly Miami. They were 1-7. Now, after their first 3-game winning streak since 2015, they're only 2 games out of a playoff spot. Raiders came to MetLife looking for a win that would get them into a tie for first. They went home 34-3 losers. The Jets pulled away with 3 touchdowns in the third quarter. Sam Darnold, 20 of 29, 315 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Confidence is, it's high. I think it started in practice, though. It starts with a week of preparation, and I don't think we had a lot of confidence, at the beginning of the season, even though the record didn't show. We still had a ton of confidence going into all those games. For us, especially as an offense, it's about executing, and we've been doing that.
Next 2 games are against the Bengals and the rematch with the Dolphins, 2 teams with a combined record of 2-20. The Bengals, the only team in the NFL with a worse record and a longer losing streak than the Giants, who in Chicago scored first and last, but in between those 2 Giant touchdowns, the Bears outscored them 19-0. Giants couldn't get a single first down in the third quarter. Daniel Jones had his usual costly fumble, and Aldrick Rosas missed 2 makeable field goals. It's the Giants' 7th loss in a row. Patriots used their stingy defense to get by Dallas in the rain, 13-9. Last night, the 49ers crushed Green Bay 37-8. New England and San Francisco both 10-1. The Nets still without Kyrie Irving, but they've got their first 3-game winning streak. They beat the Knicks at the Garden 103-101. Spencer Dinwiddie scored 30. Marcus Morris had 26, made 7 of 8 threes for the Knicks. College hoops, St. John's 78. 63. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
And John, in other sports news, the NBA is in discussions with its players' union on potential changes to the 2021 season.